The old car had been sitting untouched for 17 years when the wealthy heiress finally decided to open the garage. Dust covered every inch of its faded blue paint. The tires had gone flat long ago, the leather seats were cracked, and the engine had not made a sound since the day her father died. Everyone who saw it told her the same thing: sell it, scrap it, or forget it. But when she opened the driver's door that afternoon, she found something tucked beneath the worn leather seat. A small envelope. Her father's handwriting was on the front. And the message inside would lead her to the one person she never expected to trust. A struggling single father who worked in a tiny garage. A man who had almost nothing. A man who knew more about her father than she could have imagined. And a man who, after restoring that forgotten classic car, would leave the heiress completely speechless. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of people helping one another when life becomes difficult, please like this video, leave a comment, share this story with someone you care about, and subscribe to Little Kindness Tales. Your support means so much and helps us bring more emotional stories of hope and humanity. Her name was Elara Whitmore, and almost everyone in the city knew her family. The Whitmores had built a fortune over 3 generations through real estate, manufacturing, and luxury hotels. Their name appeared on buildings, charities, museums, and university halls. Elara had grown up surrounded by wealth so enormous that most people could not imagine what it meant to live without it. But money had never made her feel rich. At 32 years old, Elara had everything people dreamed about and almost nothing she truly wanted. She lived in a beautiful estate surrounded by gardens and tall iron gates, drove expensive cars, and attended charity events where people smiled at her while quietly calculating what her family name might be worth to them. But the one person she had wanted beside her was gone. Her father, Everett Whitmore, had died 17 years earlier. He had been the only person in her family who made her feel like she was more than an heiress. When Elara was 15, her father would take her into the garage behind their estate every Saturday morning. There, hidden from the formality of the main house, sat his pride and joy, a 1967 Aurelia Falcon, a rare classic car he had purchased when he was a young man. It wasn't the most expensive car in the world. It wasn't even the fastest. But Everett loved it. He used to tell Elara that some machines carried memories inside them. She had never understood what he meant. Not until he was gone. After Everett's death, Elara's mother had closed the garage. The car remained exactly where it had been parked on the last day he drove it. Year after year, Elara couldn't bring herself to touch it. Until one rainy afternoon, 17 years later, when she finally opened the garage doors. The sight nearly broke her heart. Dust floated through the afternoon light. The old blue car sat beneath a gray cover. Elara slowly removed it. The faded paint appeared beneath the dust. She touched the hood. For a moment, she was 15 again, standing beside her father as he explained how an engine worked. Then she noticed something beneath the driver's seat. A small envelope. Her father's handwriting. Elara's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a short note. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about business. It was about the car. Her father had written that if she ever decided to restore it, she should find someone who understood that restoring a classic wasn't simply about replacing old parts. It was about understanding why the machine mattered. At the bottom of the letter was a name. Calder Rowan. Elara had never heard it before. She searched through old family records and eventually discovered that Calder Rowan had once worked alongside her father as a mechanic. He had apparently owned a small repair shop on the edge of the city. The next morning, Elara drove there. The garage looked nothing like the luxury workshops she was accustomed to seeing. It was small. Old. The paint on the walls was peeling. A faded sign hung above the entrance. Rowan Auto Works. Inside, a man in his late 30s was repairing the engine of an old pickup truck. His name was Nolan Mercer. He was 38 years old, a single father, and the current owner of the garage. His dark hair was slightly messy, his hands were covered in grease, and his work shirt had been washed so many times that the fabric had become soft and faded. Ilara explained why she had come. Nolan listened. Then he looked at the photograph of the classic car she had brought with her. Something changed in his expression. He recognized it. But he didn't immediately agree to take the job. Ilara was surprised. She was used to people saying yes before she had even finished asking. Nolan told her that the car was badly deteriorated and that restoring it would take time. He also warned her that it wouldn't be cheap. Ilara told him she could pay whatever was necessary. Nolan shook his head. That isn't the problem. Ilara looked confused. Nolan explained that he didn't want to restore the car if she only wanted a beautiful object sitting in her driveway. He wanted to know why she cared about it. Ilara almost walked away. People usually assumed that because she was wealthy, everything she owned was replaceable. But this car wasn't. So she told him the truth. She told him about her father. About Saturday mornings. About the way he used to let her sit behind the wheel even though she was too young to drive. About the day he died. About how she had been afraid to open the garage ever since. Nolan listened quietly. Then he agreed to take the job. What Ilara didn't know was that Nolan had a daughter named Ren, a 10-year-old girl who spent afternoons at the garage after school. Nolan's wife had died several years earlier after a long illness, leaving him to raise Ren alone. He worked 6 days a week. Sometimes 7. The garage barely earned enough to keep the lights on. But Nolan refused to give up. He wanted Ren to have a stable childhood. He wanted her to know that difficult circumstances did not decide who she would become. When Ilara brought the Aurelia Falcon to the garage, Ren was fascinated. She stood beside it with wide eyes. She had never seen anything so beautiful. Ilara expected Nolan to begin immediately. Instead, he spent the first day doing something that confused her. Nothing. He didn't remove the engine. He didn't repaint the body. He simply sat inside the car. Ilara asked what he was doing. Nolan told her he was listening. He explained that every old machine had a history. Before restoring it, he wanted to understand how the previous owner had cared for it. Then he found something. A small scratch beneath the dashboard. He recognized it. It was a mark made by a specific type of tool used by mechanics many years earlier. Nolan's expression became serious. He told Ilara that her father hadn't just owned the car. He had worked on it himself. Ilara was surprised. She had never known. Over the next several weeks, the restoration began. The engine was carefully removed. The damaged parts were catalogued. The leather seats were repaired instead of replaced. The original steering wheel was preserved. Nolan refused to erase the car's history. Ilara visited almost every day. At first, she came only to check the progress. Then she began staying longer. She started talking with Ren. She learned that the little girl loved drawing cars. One afternoon, Ilara brought her a sketchbook. Ren was thrilled. Nolan looked uncomfortable. He didn't want charity. Ilara understood. She told him it wasn't charity. It was simply a gift. Something changed between them. Not suddenly. Not romantically. Just quietly. Ilara began to see the man behind the grease-stained shirt. Nolan began to see the woman behind the family name. One evening, Nolan discovered a problem. The original engine block had a serious crack. Replacing it with a modern engine would make the restoration easier. But it would destroy the authenticity of the car. Ilara was told that finding the original part could take months. Maybe years. She asked Nolan what he recommended. He said they should keep looking. Ilara asked why. Nolan smiled. Because your father waited 17 years for someone to come back for this car. The words hit her harder than he expected. Ilara asked how he knew her father so well. Nolan hesitated. Then he told her the truth. He had been working for Everett Whitmore when he was 19. Everett had taught him everything he knew about classic cars. But there was something else. Something Ilara didn't know. Her father had once helped Nolan's family. When Nolan's mother became seriously ill, Everett had quietly paid the hospital expenses. He had never asked for recognition. He had simply helped. Nolan had never forgotten. That was why he had agreed to restore the car. Not for the money. For Everett. For the man who had once given a struggling young mechanic a chance. Ilara suddenly understood. Her father had left kindness behind in places she had never known existed. And now she was discovering those pieces of him one by one. Months passed. The car slowly came back to life. The paint was restored to its original deep blue. The leather was carefully repaired. The chrome was polished. The engine was rebuilt using original components wherever possible. But Nolan kept one thing exactly as it was. A tiny scratch on the dashboard. Ilara asked why. He said it was part of the car's story. Then, one Saturday afternoon, Nolan told Ilara the restoration was finished. She arrived at the garage with Ren. The doors were closed. Nolan stood beside them. Ilara expected to see the finished car. Instead, Nolan handed her the keys. She looked confused. He told her to open the garage herself. Ilara slowly unlocked the doors. The sunlight poured inside. And there it was. The Aurelia Falcon. Perfectly restored. But something was different. The driver's door was open. Inside the car sat a small wooden box. Ilara walked closer. Her heart began racing. She opened it. Inside was an old photograph. Her father. Standing beside the car. But he wasn't alone. Beside him was a much younger Nolan. And between them stood Nolan's mother. On the back of the photograph was a handwritten message from Everett. Ilara read it silently. Her eyes filled with tears. The message said that people often believed wealth was measured by what a person owned. Everett had written that he believed real wealth was measured by the lives you helped when nobody was watching. Ilara looked at Nolan. For the first time, she understood why her father had left her the car. He hadn't wanted her to own a beautiful machine. He wanted her to remember the kind of man he had tried to be. A man who helped people without expecting anything in return. Ilara was speechless. But Nolan wasn't finished. He opened the trunk. Inside was a small envelope. Ilara recognized the handwriting immediately. Another letter. This one had been hidden inside the car years earlier. Her father had written it for her. He had known that one day she might find it. The letter told her that the car wasn't meant to keep her trapped in the past. It was meant to remind her that memories were not possessions. They were gifts. And gifts were meant to be shared. Ilara cried. Not because she had lost her father. But because she finally understood him. She looked at Nolan. Then at Ren. And suddenly she knew what she wanted to do. She didn't take the car home and put it inside another private garage. Instead, she asked Nolan to drive it. The next weekend, the three of them took the classic car to a children's community center. There, dozens of children gathered around it. Nolan showed them how the engine worked. Ren explained how she had learned to draw cars. Ilara told them about her father. For the first time, the classic car wasn't sitting silently in a locked garage. It was making memories again. Weeks later, Ilara made an announcement. She was opening a new community automotive training program for young people who couldn't afford technical education. Nolan would run it. Ren would be the program's unofficial mascot. And the restored Aurelia Falcon would sit in the center of the workshop. Not as a symbol of wealth, but as a symbol of second chances. Nolan initially refused to accept the opportunity. He said he didn't want Ilara to feel obligated because of her father's connection to him. Ilara told him something he never expected. She said the program wasn't about repaying an old debt. It was about continuing a kindness that had started long before either of them knew each other. Nolan finally agreed. Years later, the workshop became one of the most successful community training programs in the city. Hundreds of young people learned skills there. Some became mechanics. Some became engineers. Some simply found confidence. And every year, on the anniversary of Everett Whitmore's death, Ilara, Nolan, and Ren would gather around the restored classic car. They would clean it together. They would tell stories. And they would remember the man who had unknowingly connected their lives. Ilara had entered Nolan's garage as a wealthy heiress looking for a mechanic. She left with something far more valuable. A family. A purpose. And a lesson her father had tried to teach her years earlier. Real wealth was never about how much you could own. It was about how much good you could leave behind. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Little Kindness Tales. Your support helps us continue telling stories that remind us that kindness can travel through generations, sometimes reaching people who were never even there when the first act of kindness happened. And before the story ends, I have one special request. Comment, "Kindness is true wealth," below if you believe the greatest things in life are not always the things we can buy. Because the old car had been forgotten for 17 years. The garage had gathered dust. The memories had faded. But kindness had survived. It had survived in the heart of a mechanic who never forgot the man who helped his family. It had survived in the daughter who finally opened a door she had been afraid to touch. And it lived on in the children who would grow up believing that their circumstances did not have to determine their future. Ilara once thought she was restoring her father's car. But in the end, she realized something much more beautiful. The car had been restoring her. It had brought her out of a life surrounded by wealth but filled with loneliness. It had introduced her to people who valued her heart instead of her family name. And it had shown her that sometimes the greatest inheritance a parent can leave behind isn't money. It's the kindness they planted in other people's lives. And sometimes, years later, that kindness